all. Thank you so much for joining today. This is the Python Kickstart for Oilfield Basics, Oilfield Analytics, whatever you want to call it. I am Catherine Mills. I'm host of the CRUDE Audacity podcast. I'm also an operations engineer for Surtech that is right up the road. So I have wrangled some of my influencers that I have been interviewing, and we are trying to pay it forward, give back to industry. I know a lot of people are in transition right now, and what we want to do is start providing Python classes so that whether you're looking to move out of industry, just want an upper leg, or just trying to get started with basic machine learning and coding analytics itself, you have that option. So before we jump in, because y'all know Matt's like right over there, huge shout out to our sponsors. That's creepy. Our first one is RMS SEPM. They were the first ones to help bring this idea to life. Thank you so much. Y'all be sure to check them out on LinkedIn, Facebook, and their website. Our second one up is DIPS, Denver International Petroleum Society. It's a smaller society here in the Rockies, but their reach is absolutely global, huge organization, and just some awesome knowledge. So again, check them out on LinkedIn and their website. The next one is HackerVillage, which actually is a company that Matt and I have started. And what we do is we bring hackathons and coding classes like this to the energy sector. So the reason there was a question on the registration of, are you interested in hackathons in the future, is because we have partnered with the Global Energy Management Program and various organizations throughout the Rockies to bring you the first full hackathon here in October. So be sure to follow the CRUDE Audacity on LinkedIn so that you can stay up to date. And when time comes, you can get a ticket, because it's going to be similar to this, cheap entry, and give you just a breadth of exposure and experience and knowledge across the energy sector. Again, I have to do a plug for myself because I am the host of the CRUDE Audacity. So if you could go online, Apple Podcast is usually the best one to rate and review, and actually check out Matt's episode. He was my first interview, and I cannot thank him enough, because we would not be where we are today without your bravery. So let's see. Let me tell you a little bit about Matt. He is about 6'4". He's a big burly guy. He's a geologist. He thinks he's always right, and I've been arguing with him for years. I actually used to sit behind him when we worked downtown together, and I was terrified of him because he would be cranking on the computer so much in terms of coding that his computer would start smoking and smell like it was melting. So we became fast friends. He actually started me in Python analytics myself. So I've always been somewhere between an intermediate and a beginner. I really have no desire to go past that. So I know enough to sound dangerous, but if you ask me to do anything super advanced, I usually go to Matt. He did not start off as a coder. He really bulldozed his way through it. So the point and purpose of these classes and to spread this knowledge forward is, it does not matter if you have a high school education, if you've been a field guy your entire life, you're somebody 30 years of experience and you think that Facebook is the devil. Coding is by far one of the easiest things to pick up. He is an excellent teacher, so we are going to start from the beginning on it. But just to go ahead and kick us off, I'm going to let Matt sit over here, and I'm going to field some of y'all's questions from my computer over there. So here you go. Oh, and grab a beer.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, guys. We're going to go ahead and...
Your makeup looks good.
Oh, thank you. We're going to go ahead and chat just a little bit about how I ended up getting started, because I actually worked 10 years in industry and went back to grad school as an adult. So I just want you to know where I was coming from when I was actually doing this. And I started a master's at Mines, and the research consortium I had joined in the project I was working on, this was in 2015. We had a major that, with that big drop that happened right there, that actually ended up dropping out of our research consortium and taking all of the data with them. And I had to really quickly figure out whether or not I was going to do just a small project of a couple townships, or if I was going to figure out a way in order to do the regional project that I wanted to do. I wrote up some basic code in Excel and Visual Basic. It was clunky as all get out for separating production. but it worked, and it encouraged me to go ahead and either choose between MATLAB and Python. And Python doesn't have the paywalls that MATLAB has in place, so I chose that, and I started down the road with that. I started working that summer on an internship with Colorado Geological Survey with a good friend of mine, and also another programming geologist, Michael Hardy, and we were off the races. It changed how I view a lot of the world, because as you get into this more and more, Python can change the way you think. It goes from, and I'm sure everybody on this call, you have your area of expertise. If you go from what can I do for the problems that I have with the tools that I have, to opening up what you want to do, because it's not just the softwares that you have available to you. You do anything you want. And the other thing is the automation, because you can automate all of the boring stuff. You don't have to do that. So that being said, I think we're going to go ahead. We're running a little early. We're going to go ahead and hop in. Let me get the links for you guys if anybody didn't have those pulled up. So if you didn't get the Colab links, they are available via my GitHub. So let me go ahead and share my screen. There we go. All right. Get it?
There you go.
All right. So there's two originally Jupyter notebooks in here. The first one we're going to go through is basic Python syntax. So we go in here, and if you're at this page here, you can see Open in Colab. Go ahead and click that. And that'll pull up the Colab notebook. If you get a warning, and some people will, depending on what the security settings are from your company, saying that this is not a notebook published by Google, it's okay. I didn't put any malicious code in here, I promise. It's super basic. But we're going to go ahead and get started. There are a few rules for the class. Take time. So that is, if you have a question, ask a question. Chat over. Catherine's going to be aggregating those and trying to help me so we can move along efficiently. Be nice. Be nice to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. And be nice to others. But most of all, have fun. Grab your beverage. Enjoy yourself. We're going to have a lot of fun with this, because the more and more you use this and you find applications to apply it in your own workflows, the better you're going to be off. It really does change a lot of things. So cheers. Okay, basic schedule. Introductions, we're going to go through basic syntax, which is going to take about a half hour. I will give you an exercise that you guys can go ahead and try out. We'll go through that. You can jump up at that point in time, you use the restroom, grab another beer, do what you need to, and then I'll solve that for you. And you can see how I do it. And there's a couple different ways you can do it, but you can see one. And then we'll talk about loops, function, and logic, and classes too. And then we'll have a short closing. There will be, depending on how much time we have at the end, another little short exercise where you guys can try that. And if we have time, I'll show you how I solve it. That's not the only way to do it. But again, special thanks to Catherine Mills and the CRUDE Audacity Podcast, and Catherine Scholler, and the RMS SEPM. And DIPS, which I didn't update my notebook. Sorry. So Python. If you have your code folded, you can actually go over here, right here, to expand that, these little arrows on the upper left. Python is an objective programming language. And what that means is that you can create variables, or actually objects, which you can store individual variables that are separate within them, or you can apply functions to them. Python is super tolerant of extra spaces, and it is meant to be read by a human. That's the whole kind of thing behind it. That really makes it stand out in a lot of the programming languages. If you're new completely for Jupyter notebooks or for Colab notebooks, if you click in a code cell, and we have markdown cells, which are text right in here that you can see, and then code cells, you click, hold down Shift and hit Enter. And there's our warning. It says import this. Running, maybe. Didn't go. Hold on just a second. Technical difficulties.
That's really embarrassing for you.
Yeah, I know. I ran it earlier. That's weird. Why is it doing that? It works for you guys? Yeah? Okay. Okay. Sounds good. So import this. This was actually a poem written by one of the original engineers that started contributing towards Python. And it goes through the Zen of Python. And Python, like I mentioned before, it's supposed to be machine or readable by a human. And that it's you see it, and the farther and farther you get into it, that it is present in all places that you actually end up running into it. Other things. When I first started out, I actually took Dr. Chuck's course. It's called Python for Everybody. It's a good generalist course. It's not really applied much, but it'll get you started. It'll get you going where you need to go. If you need a certificate for work or something like that, you can do it through Coursera, but otherwise it's free. And I really like free resources. I think that's, if somebody has the gumption to go ahead and go out and learn a new skill, there shouldn't be a paywall in the way. We're going to be talking about some basic syntax for Python. In Python, you can assign different types of things to a variable. And that has a name that you can put it as almost anything you want. There are some certain things that are reserved. Usually those are special things that Python language actually uses as a function. But we can get strings, numbers, lists, tuples, sets, and dictionaries. And I'll go into those with more detail. If you're reading through Python code and you see a pound sign, that is telling Python code to ignore that line. Commonly, this is called commenting out a line. It's good for sticking notes in your code for other people to read later, or for troubleshooting things, turning things off and on without having to delete them out of your code. You can also do triple quotes, so 1, 2, 3. Those tell Python to go ahead and ignore it. The cool thing about those is that if you put a string in there, and we'll see this later, it will ignore regular quotes or single quotes within that. And if you're a Windows user, there are special characters that are the /. And with those, it says to Python that I need to pay attention to the next character following. So if you want to ignore that, let's say a path to a folder, you need to put an R preceding that. So we'll go ahead and get started. In this case, I've go ahead and put my name in here. And if you want to go ahead and follow along and run this on your own, go ahead and put your name in the quotes, and then we'll run that. And what that does is it assigns this string to the variable named name. In Jupyter Notebooks or Colab, we can actually have 2 different outputs or ways to outputting. If it's the last variable in a block of code, you can run it and it'll pop up. If you want to run something within the lines of code and kind of watch where the variable changes as you go along, you can also use print, where you can do that at the end. One of the interesting things with strings, if you notice when they're output, and if you don't use print, they always have a single quote around them. So keep that in mind. With strings, you can also combine them with the plus sign. Everything in there has to be a string, but that's one of the ways you can combine it. If you notice here, I actually am skipping a point, and I'm not actually combining with plus, but I have a comma. And when we just run that just by itself, it actually makes what's called a tuple. So these two strings get added together, but it's separate between these. And we'll talk about tuples a little bit later. But if you do your print function, it'll actually separate it by a space, and it'll output it, and it's just one long string. So we can do a couple of different things with calling variables independently. So with strings, we can index them. So this means that we're saying, hey, I want this character within that string. And with Python, the count always starts with 0. So you go for the first item in that list or that string, you go 0, 1, 2, 3. It doesn't start with 1. And that's important to kind of keep in mind. So if we want to see what is the first character in the variable called name, we use square brackets and 0. And it comes up for me, M, and I imagine something a little bit different for you guys. We can also do what's called a slice. And in slices, you put either the position of the character you want to start and the one you want to stop before in that, separated by a colon, or you leave one of those out. And we'll show some examples of that here in a sec. So we want to see the first 3 letters of your name. We can do from 0 to 3, and for mine it does MAT. We can also take that object, which is a variable. We know because it's a string, there's different methods we can apply to it. So let's say you're parsing through a whole bunch of stuff, whether that be from land descriptions or a bunch of drilling records, or you're going through a mud log and looking for certain words or shows. You could definitely do that. What I like to do is I like to change everything to uppercase. And then that way you don't have the variability, because Python is case specific. It does not match whenever you ask in a logic function if something has a capital letter in it to something that doesn't. So you guys are starting out in something that can be a little hard and trying sometimes, but we're not doing it. Well, we're not doing it because because it's hard. We're doing it because it's hard, and a lot of other people don't do it. And it will give you a leg up. So we're going to take JFK's Rice speech, which really spoke to me during grad school. And we'll go ahead and read in this whole speech as a variable called JFK and the date that it was given. One of the other things you can do with strings is you can split them by a character that you define or a string of characters. In this case, we're going to use a special character /n. And that is actually a new line. And then we're going to define that to a new variable called JFK lines, which is each line of the speech. And then we'll go ahead and take a peek at that. I would recommend that as you're going through this, keep an eye on what your variable is doing. You can always go back in and remove your print functions and that kind of stuff, so you can streamline your code. But it's a good idea to kind of watch what you're doing. So if we notice here, we're going to make, and we'll talk about this in a bit, a list with square brackets, and they're separated by commas here at the end. And we have each line of the speech. We can also do something called replace with strings, which is where we go in and we say, for everything that's in that string, I want to find this character and replace it with this character. I'm a little bit old school, so I like double spaces at the end of my sentences. Even though Microsoft Word just took that out. Yeah, I know. Like I said, old school. It's a style thing. Makes it easier to read. So we can go in here. But remember, it does everything you tell it to do, even sometimes things that you don't want it to do. For example, it took an extra space after Mr. That's not a new sentence. And you will see this time and time again as you go through this when you're debugging your own code. Just keep that in mind. It does what you tell. Okay, so if you want to look more into strings and some of the other methods that you would like to do, I've given you a link to the documentation from Python. We're going to go ahead and move on to numbers. Have a quick sip of a beer here. Numbers. So let's go ahead and unfold this code. So numbers come in a variety of types. We can have integers, we can have float numbers, we can have complex or imaginary numbers. So we're going to give an example about the moon here. So we'll go ahead and run this code, or that block of code, and what it does is it'll assign those variables, return numbers, to the different variable names. Python recognizes a lot of the basic math functions. There's even more that you can bring in by importing a library called math that is included in the basic library or the basic Python installation. There's also, if you want to do array mathematics, there's NumPy, which we can talk about. But these are the basic ones. There's a couple of different things in the symbology. There's power, which is actually 2 asterisks. We can also do floor division, and then we can also do remainders with percentages. There's some documentation on math library. We'll go ahead and I want to read out what this line of code actually says to try to get you guys in the mindset of what does it actually say. So I'm making a variable called weight underscore pounds. I want it to be an integer. And this function right here called input. What that is that when I run it, or if you run it in your own code that you write, it asks the user or the person that ran that to put something in there. And that is the string that you put in. So I said, what do I weigh in pounds? And everybody can lie if they want. I'll put 215 in here.
Did you lie?
Yeah, I lied. I'm heavier than that. It's COVID weight, man. COVID weight. I know, right? But anyways, and so we can actually take a peek at what that variable actually is. And we can run it in the last line of that block of code. And we have 215 or whatever you guys are. Hopefully you're lighter than I am. You can also nest math within functions in Python. And this is super useful because you can go ahead and even though it's against the Zen of Python, you can nest items. So in this case, we're going to take my weight and then we're going to convert it to the equivalent of what I would weigh on the moon with variables that we assign up here. We're also going to use another method or function. It's called round. What round does is you can put any number in here and then you tell it how many decimal places you want at the end. We'll go ahead and run that. It didn't like showing it for some reason. Oh yeah, because it assigned it to a new name. So I weigh a felt equivalent of 35 pounds. Sometimes when you're debugging your code, you think that logic function should be right, but it's not. And often the thing that I find is that my type of variable is wrong. It may be a string when it should be a float number or vice versa. So it's always useful to know the type, and you can do that with type and then brackets after that, and it'll tell you what type is actually there. You can change the variable from its type. So we were in a float type before, and in this we'll actually change it to an integer. And remember what I was talking about with strings and printing. They get separated by a space in here. We can go ahead and redefine the variable weight of moon on the moon. And in this, we're going to go ahead and you read from the inside in. So for this variable, weight moon, we're going to change it to an integer. Then we're going to change it to a string. And then we're going to add that string to pounds. And then we're going to redefine it. We'll go ahead and take a peek on what that is. And notice that when we put that out there outside of the print function, we have these that are defining that it's a string. Python also has a method that you can call as eval. And what that is that we actually, it tells Python, hey, can you take a look at this and decide what you think it is? This is really useful if you have a CSV file that has a whole bunch of stuff in it. And you want to decide what each item is and do specific things to those. But for this case, Remember the replace method from strings as before. We're going to go ahead and strip off the pounds and put nothing back. And then we're going to go ahead and convert it back to earth weight. And for that string that is for that float number that is resulting, we get that result. But like any scientific calculation, you need to watch your significant digits, you need to watch rounding errors and that kind of stuff. If you'd like more information about numbers, there's a link right here for the documentation from Python on numbers. All right, let's expand lists and have a beverage. I like this double space till I die. I completely agree.
The comments aren't showing up on mine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Useless over
Okay.
here. I'm gonna enjoy my Chinese food.
Well, that's good. All right, lists. So the two things you need to remember about lists is that they are ordered and they're editable. Okay. So lists are a group of variables that you put together or of objects, and you can either make them with square brackets or the method list with curved brackets. In this case, we're going to go ahead and make a variable called primes with square brackets, a whole bunch of stuff in here, and just one string at the end. So we'll go ahead and define that variable. And like strings, we can index them and we can also slice them. So we're going to index what's the first variable that we see in there, and that is 2. And then let's go ahead and slice it. So let's see what it is for the first 2 variables that we have. The cool thing is you can actually leave out that first one if you only want the first 3. With indexing and slicing, one of the other cool things you can do is you can use negative numbers. And negative number says, hey, I want it, in this case, everything except for the last variable. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to redefine it to the same variable name. And what that does is it pulls off the mork string that's at the end of it. There's also a cool thing where you can do 2 colons in here. And then we can grab every second number or third if you like. You can also use that for reversing a list, which is what we have here. So we flip it around. You can also perform methods on lists. And because we went ahead and pulled that string out of there up there, we can sum it. We can get the length, which is len. And we can also add with a method called append. And you don't need to redefine that variable with append. It does it on its own. So we can say, hey, I want to add 73 to the end of this list. And we print it out here. You can also use remove, which will remove an item from a list. There's also a special type of remove, which is called pop. And what pop does is it removes it from the list, and then it also returns it. And this is really nice in functions if you're moving things in and out. You only want to do something to something in the list once. So where append adds something to the end of your list, you can also use a method called insert. Insert, you put the index and where you want it to go, and then whatever you want it to go in your list. So, and this is a little prequel for what we're going to be talking about here in just a bit. But this is what's called a for loop. And a for loop, if we read this, we're going to make a variable called I for index. And how this reads is for the P items in this list, I want to go ahead and print P, this string of a colon, the type that P is, and at the end of that print string, and this is something new we didn't talk about yet, I want the special character of tab. It's like tabbing over. And what this does, and we go in here and I, remember index, plus equals, and that's the same thing as saying I equals I plus 1. It's shorthand. when, if I is over or equal to 5, I want to print that. And the neat thing is that when print is default value or value for end is actually /n. So what this does, and then we're going to reset I to 0. This does is it's a way of printing. So you get columns. We'll go ahead and run that. So we have 5 columns, or yeah, 5 columns set up. And we can print that stuff out. We can also do for loops within lists, which is super useful if you want to combine everything down to one line. So in this case, we're going to take all of the prime numbers, which we have are all integers up here, and we're going to say for the P items in primes, I want to go ahead and convert them to a string and then redefine it to the variable primes. We'll go ahead and run that there. Another nice thing that you can do with lists, as long as everything is a string, is you can use join. And what this says is that here, I want to define a joining character. I use this a lot whenever I'm formatting API numbers. It's super useful when we're doing a couple other items, but we'll go ahead and do it with nothing here. And we're going to just make a long string of all the numbers that we had in there for the prime numbers. We can redefine that string to list, and it breaks it up on every specific item. Rather than using a split, we can go ahead and sort those things, and it goes by number and also by alphanumeric. And then we can use a method called count. And count will actually return the number of times it sees something within that. And we can actually see that we have 6 instances of the number 7 within this list. If you'd like to explore some of the other methods for lists, here's documentation here. And we'll go ahead and move down to tuples. Again, if you want to unfold your code, it's up there on the left. It's halfway through this notebook. Alrighty, tuples. Okay, tuples. The things that you remember is that they are ordered, so they maintain their order, and they're also like a write-only disk. So you can only write to them once. They take a lot less memory in your computer, so they're really good for when you start to get a little farther in your efficiency stuff. But we'll go ahead and you can make them with curved brackets, as we see here. So for this one, for our first example, we'll print that out. And whenever you hear somebody saying you're packing a tuple, I know there's quite a few geologists on here, and geologists has an affinity of beer, as I'm sure many other disciplines do. Yeah, and right. But in this case, we're going to do what's called packing a tuple. And you don't even have to define anything. You can just send things separated by a comma into a variable, and that's called packing a tuple. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and after that, we'll print out the type of what that variable is. And just like strings and lists, we can get the length of it. Just like strings and lists, you can index and you can slice. And the next thing you can do is you can actually go in and say, hey, what index is water in that? We'll print that out here in a second. And then you can do what's called unpacking. And it's just the reverse. We can take that tuple and then define a bunch of variables with it. You will see this used somewhat behind the scene on a lot of functions as you go a little farther into Python. A function may return a bunch of stuff and then you define it to several variables. So for this case, we can see that our tuple is empty. We packed it, has a length of 3. We can see that the first position within that, the tuple beer is water. We got barley and water, yeah, position 1 is where its index is and what it's made from. If you'd like to know more about tuples, I've included a link to the documentation. And we can go ahead on to sets. We'll unfold that. Sets. So the thing you need to know about sets is they are unordered. So it doesn't matter what you put them in order, it's not preserved. And they can only hold something once. And that behavior is super useful when you start to actually build a little bit more complex logic functions. You can produce a set by either set with the brackets or by curly brackets. There's also frozen sets, which are not editable, and we won't really get into those today. But we'll go ahead and we'll print our prime characters that we had from before. And what we're going to do is we're going to take for those P characters in this list, we're going to change it to integers, and then we're going to redefine that list as a set. And what you're going to see is that it's going to only allow those things to be in there once. So I went through this and said, okay, what are the unique items that were in that list? And redefine that to our character set variable. We can also define that rather than calling by set by curly brackets. And we have our digits here. Set operations. These are super useful. You can get them out of the link from below, but I've included them before, and there's usually two different ways of doing these. If you want to inspect one set for items that are in the other, or items that are not shared between the both or are shared between the both. There's both methods and a shorthand equivalent for those. Going to unhide that cell there and give an example of those comparing two different sets and the items that for one case are in both or one is not in the other. If you'd like to see more, I've included a link for documentation. And we'll go ahead and take a look at dictionaries. Is there any questions right off on where we're at? I know I've been kind of walking through this. I'll watch the chat here for just a second.
I can't see them.
It's just popping up there. No?
We will be recording, putting this on YouTube next week.
Yep, we'll be working on that. Yeah, we're going to be setting all this stuff up on YouTube. So if you have additional questions, you guys can go ahead and ping us, and we'll try to do a follow-up with those. And if there's something that needs a little more expansion that you didn't get, please let us know. What platforms do you use to code in Python? So I usually prototype most of my code in Jupyter Notebooks. I think that's what you're asking about. And then I use an integrated development environment, an IDE called PyCharm. So whenever I actually move stuff that I've made into a more automated sense, I'll move from a Jupyter Notebook, which stores the variables as you go through, like what we're doing here, to something that just runs it. So I use, if your platform question is on the type of computer, I use a PC because of security requirements through work. Linux is generally the approved method or a computer type for most folks. A lot of people also use Mac because it is almost exactly the same as Linux. And Zane Job, one of my colleagues over at Minds that I teach with, he'll chat a little bit about that at the end. He's a Mac guy. Is there any other questions before we move on to dictionaries? Oh, why types matter. Well name is a string and API is an integer. You know, that's a really good one too. And we'll go into that a little bit with logic functions. And remember before I said, you know, whenever you're going through and you're running your code and things aren't working right, at least for me, where I end up messing up a lot, is because if you say 1, 2, 3, you know, the county code for Weld County, and a string 1, 2, 3, and you say, hey, are those the same? No, they're not. And you do those kind of things, and it's really important in order to make sure that you're talking apples to apples. Because Python, like I said before, it does what you tell it to do. It doesn't do anything extra. You have to write that in. Have you done a lot of work with log data, LAS file? A ton. And binning and normalizations. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a really good Python library called Lassio that allows you to load a log file, and you can call as an object all of the log curves as numpy arrays. It is super, super useful. One of the things that I did when I was working over at Anschutz is I wrote up some code that did spatially normalizations. And I actually used a 3-point normalization rather than a linear normalization.
You wrote code that replaced me.
Yeah, she complains about this, but only first year are engineers. But for that instance, it allowed us to change those normalization variables as you went around a field and not pay attention to outliers because we checked those in advance. Yep, Lassio. Zane popped that up there on chat. That's absolutely great. Coding buddies. Social programming. I'll tell you what, I think that's one of the best ways to learn because you can do a lot of this by yourself. But as you get farther in, it's really important to see how other people do things and maybe seeing a different perspective on that. I highly encourage going to hackathons. Agile does some really good ones. I included links to theirs. We're doing one association with the CU GEM program in October. That's non-industry, industry specific. It's just energy. Yep. Sounds good. Yeah, absolutely. That'll be good. I'll see you in their class. All right, so dictionaries. All right, since Python 3.6, dictionaries have been ordered, except, this is where you're always learning, in Colab. After 3.6 in Python, they are ordered. But we'll see an example where if we find an outlier. So dictionaries, you can either call it by using dict with parentheses or curly brackets with your key and a colon and your variable. So in this case, we're going to use the abbreviations for different states. And we'll assign it to a variable called state abbrev. We can also add to a dictionary by using square brackets, telling it what we want the key to be, and then what we want the variable to be. And this is the same as assigning it with the key and the variable here. So we'll go ahead and go in here and assign some territories. And then just like any time in your code, I recommend periodically checking and looking at what your variables are doing. So we can see in this example, we went ahead and added our territories. We can also call a variable from a dictionary by using its key. It's the same thing with the square brackets. We're saying for this dictionary, what is this key? We can also use the method called get to do that. Now get is extremely useful because let's say you're counting something. You can actually go in and define, or putting in a string, define a default value. So if it's not found within your dictionary, it returns something. So we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll say ZZ is not in there. It actually then returns not found. Or you can iterate through them. If you iterate through them directly, you're going to get the keys. If you use the method called items, you'll get the key and the variable. So we're saying for the keys and variables in this dictionary's items, I want to go in here and I'm going to make it into a very, very long run-on sentence that says what the state abbreviation is and what that means. But for the last one, we're saying for this list, of this dictionaries, the index of that key, which is our last one. If that's the last one, I want to use and a period at the end. Otherwise, I don't have to do the and I separate it by a comma and a space. So we'll go ahead and run that out, and we can see this AKA is the abbreviation for Alaska, or so on until we get to the very end. Logic functions like this are super useful when we go ahead and going through things. We'll go ahead and see some more examples in the next one. Beginning in Python 3.8, there's also another one like items, but it does it in reverse. If you'd like to see other methods, there's a link to the documentation for Python dictionaries there. So we're running right along. We're going to go ahead, and this is the moment where you guys can hop up, use restroom, grab another beverage if you would like, or give it a try. I'm going to step away for just a little bit, and then I'll come back in and start solving this in just one of the ways that you can. There's multiple ways, but what I want you to do is take the variable that we called the JFK speech up here.
There is a question. Yes,
what's the question? Hold on, Matt. A new or more.
What kind of beer are you drinking?
Right now, I'm drinking a Trooper. It's an English beer. But I'm going to switch over here to Coda, which is one of my favorite breweries here in Denver.
Just as a refresh, what are the differences between parentheses, square brackets, and curly brackets?
Okay. Square brackets. Those are lists. Okay. Then dictionaries have a key and a value separated by a colon and curly brackets. Sets are curly brackets. Tuples are curved brackets. Yeah.
What is the difference between 1D NumPy arrays and a list?
A what?
What is the difference between 1D NumPy array and a list?
You can convert between the two. Array is just an array, and you can apply that in NumPy. It's actually the library and the type of object that it is. Lists are natively in Python. For NumPy arrays, you have to do at the top of your code, import NumPy, usually as a shorthand as NP. And then you can utilize those.
The key of dictionaries has to be unique.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Otherwise, you overwrite it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, those are them. So leave your camera on so they can check out your books in the back there.
Yep.
And we can come back in 5 minutes.
Yep. So that's the variable you need. Let's go ahead and bring it down here. And go ahead and give it a try, and I'll give it a start here in a bit. Hey, I want to try to figure out, I'm not a Zoom expert. Zane has been working on something. I've been trying to help what I can. Let's see here. Can we fire Zane?
No, I'm here. You have to allow my video though.
Oh yeah.
More, make host.
You're real smart.
Selective intelligence. Does that now do it for you?
There you go.
Yeah.
Hey, there we go. So for those of you who don't know, Zane Job is an amazing individual and a very smart set of intelligence. He's over at Minds. If you guys are ever interested in continuing your education. But he's been working on something for those of you that want to take this to a little bit more of a in-depth level. So, Zane?
Yeah, so pardon my haircut, y'all. This is a quarantine haircut. Mine usually looks a little bit more suave like Matt's, but I decided just to buzz it all off for simplicity during this whole thing. So, yeah, so I'm a research professor at Minds, right there in Golden, and we've just developed what we're calling Earth Resource Data Science. So it's going to be a graduate level online certificate. So basically what that means is that you can, after you take 4 courses, you get a graduate level certificate that you can either have for your employer, for example, to get a bonus or something like that, or you can end up rolling that certificate into a full-on master's program. So in any case, yeah, exactly. Yeah, red or blue, huh? So in any case, the first offering of that course is going to be called Earth Resource Data Science 1 Fundamentals. And so that's going to be dealing more in depth with what Matt is talking about today, and we'll end up, spending a bunch of time doing these types of things, as well as getting into some of the common subsurface packages like LAS.io and Welly and Segway.io and a bunch of other sort of industry specific packages. And then we'll get into some, a little bit of statistics and a little bit of machine learning. And then the second course of that is going to be called Earth Resource Data Science 2, which is a more machine learning focused course. And then there will be another course, which is a data science course that's taught by the computer science department. And then there will be a free elective, basically, so you can just take sort of whatever you want. And so that 4-course package will be, this certificate program. It'll be fully online, so you won't have to drive out to mines to take the course. And we're developing that specifically from feedback from industry folks that want to get these types of educational opportunities, but they can't get off work at 10 a.m. to go to a course. So in any case, Matt will be pretty heavily involved in the development of these courses, and hopefully we're going to wrangle him into teaching 1 or 2 of them. And so in any case, thanks for the floor, Matt. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what Zane is talking about, and a lot of what I end up doing is regular expressions, and this doesn't just apply just to geologists. This is landmen. I can't tell you how many times I'm going through and pulling out PLSS descriptions, or for engineers, and we're going in and figuring out economics based off the decline curves and looking at assets and evaluating those. There's a lot more than just the geology side on this.
Yeah, and we're planning on getting into a little bit of Python GIS integration, and so of course we're all geospatial people.
Yeah.
And so I'm dealing with geospatial data types, being able to talk to for Python and ArcGIS or QGIS to be able to talk to each other. So you can automate some of those tasks that you spend hours and hours doing. You can spend minutes doing them, and go get a coffee and push go. That's the idea, right? You push go, you go get a coffee, you come back, and everything's done. So instead of spending hours and hours in Excel trying to figure out how to delete a column out of a shapefile or something like that. So
absolutely true. It's absolutely invaluable with what Zane's saying there. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and get going with number 2. Let's see here. Share. All right. Are we all back? All right. Okay. So we'll go ahead and take our variable. Let's see. For this one, I'm going to go with words. I want to make a new variable called words.
What are we doing in this chapter?
What are we doing? We are doing loops, logic functions, and then classes very briefly. But we'll do split. Actually, let's go back here just a second. So I know that these are sentences, so I'm going to get rid of some of the punctuation that's in there. And then I'm going to take that same string. I want to split it up by spaces. These are all methods I talked about above. And then I want to go in here and I want to say words, which is the new variable, count. Oh, hold on a second here. I messed up because remember what I was talking about, case. There we go. All right, so this is part of debugging your code. Let's see here. Ah, look at there. 7. So there's 7 instances in there. Here's a couple of bonus tips and tricks there at the bottom for running Jupyter Notebooks. Some of these don't apply in Colab. This was originally a Jupyter Notebooks item. But we'll go ahead and we'll leave here. And we'll go ahead and go back to the GitHub. And I'll send this over again for those of you who don't have it up right away in the chat. And we're going to go ahead and go down to loops, logic, and functions. And as before, as this comes up, give it a bit. Q&A. Oh, here's this. I used that code, but the answer was 4. Split, print, JCount. Yeah. There's probably, with the one that got 4, there may not have been a replacement item in there because I know that when we go in, we can go and with some other stuff that I didn't show you. Hold on a second here. We'll go home, print, and let's see here. So we're going to do one of those inside of that x4, x in words, if x, if moon is in x, and we'll talk about these logic functions here in a second. And then remember what I was talking about with commenting. We're going to go ahead and swap those around right here. Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll take a look. So there's some of these in here that are having commas and question marks, and if those weren't efficiently replaced, then you can get that. So, all right, let's pop back over here. Everybody have loops, logic, and functions. We're going to open it up in Colab. Can I explain why? So if it's not an exact match, then it won't match it. That can be because of case. That can be because of punctuations at the end. There's probably something that is very minute in your code that's actually not allowing it to match exactly. This is one of those things that when it's face-to-face interaction, I could come up to your computer and look at your code, and I can walk through it. But it's a little tough for me to do on why that doesn't work. If you want to email me exactly what you wrote in, I'd be happy to sit down with you and send it back, and we can take a look. All right. All right. Loops, logic, and functions. So loops, what it allows you to do is iterate through items within groupings of objects in a couple of different methods. There are 2 different types of loops. There's 4 where you're looping through those items, and there's also while. And while, you allow it to run until something is false. While loops are a little bit dangerous in your code, and you just need to be aware of this because sometimes it can happen. You may accidentally make something a Boolean that doesn't. Boolean is a logic function, by the way. that doesn't actually ever become false. So you're saying, while something is true, do this line of code below it, but it may never actually change. So you need to know how to exit those when you're learning to do while loops. For Jupyter Notebooks, use a stop button, which is right here. You can also use, if you're using just pure Python code, you can use Control-C, and then there's a stop button through runtime for Colab notebooks. So we're going to import a library for the first time. We're going to say from the library time, import the function called sleep. And what sleep does is it tells Python to just hold on for a number of seconds. And in this case, we're saying half a second. So for the index equals 0, and while that index is less than 10, print the index. We're going to do it with return. This is kind of cool. This is that optional variable at the end of print. And what we're doing is we're going to bring the stylus back and overwrite what we wrote. This is super function, or super useful. So if you're like giving an update status for a very long running function, you can say, hey, where are you at? Did you crash and you're stuck? Was there some type of error I didn't know? And it'll give you a status indicator. But in this case, we're just going to use sleep. Then we're going to go in I, and this is the same as I equals I plus 1. And we'll print I at the end. And we'll run anyway. No malicious code in here. And what this will do is it'll go through and it'll count up until we actually get to 10. On mine, it jumped right to it. I think that was part of the import on that. But I commonly use while loops for formatting well numbers, APIs or UWI. So in this case, we're going to take integers. So we're going to say in the state of Colorado, 5, and county, well, we're going to use the McKenzie well, which is actually up in Boulder, and then our well number. Now notice these are all integers, and what's missing right there and right here? It's that preceding 0. A lot of times you get data that's set up like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to redefine the state variable as a string, and then we're going to say while the variable state, which is 5, has a length that is less than 2, I want to add a 0 to the front of that. I'm going to do the same thing for county to bring it up to the length of 3. And we're going to do the same thing for the well and bring it up to the length of 5. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to add all these together with a delimiter of a dash. And we're going to redefine that as the UWI and then formatted. We'll go ahead and run that. So we have it pulled out and we've added those preceding items and we have a formatted UWI number. For loops. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through each item in this list. So for the part of this list, I want to print the part, sleep for a half a second, and then it'll go back and print the next part and sleep for half a second. So it'll go in and it'll print those out. And notice whenever I say in dictionaries in there, because if you loop in this method without the method items, you only get the keys. We can also use nested loops. These can be for or while. So we're going to go ahead and walk through these things that we're defining, these variables we're defining up here. And we're going to look at how they walk through each individual one separately. So for strings, it's going to be through the individual items. And we'll see here at the end, it's only the keys on dictionaries. Can I explain why? Was that one?
No, we answered that.
Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and move on to logic operators. Is there any questions on that? with for loops and while loops when you read out the code. So while loops are while something is true, keep doing what's below it. And for loops are for each item in that list, do this to the item. Think we're good? All right. Logic operators. These are also called Booleans. So if something is equal to something, that test uses a double equal. Otherwise, these are really similar to a lot of math classes. We can also use in to see if it's in a grouping, whether that's a list or a set. Not in. And these will return true and false statements. So here's some really common ones. If it's equal, if it's less than, if it's more than, is it less than or equal, or if it's more than or equal. And then is it in this list? And we can go ahead and walk through those. Those are some pretty straightforward examples. We can also use if, else if, and else. So what that is you can do these in a series of order. So you can say, hey, first check this. If not that, check this. And else is at the very end. You say, if neither of those are true, do this. Or you can leave those off. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and do is 1 equal to 2, print yup or nope, less than yup or nope. And we can go ahead and go through those. We can also do those in or not in. And remember, type is super important because it doesn't recognize something unless the type is the same. You can have a string that is 1, but if it's not the same as an integer is 1, it doesn't work. For that example. There's also a method that we can check for type. And this is super useful when you're going through things and formatting stuff, getting data cleaned up, ready to use in a bigger function. And then it's called isInstance. So we're saying, is this variable an instance of the type of string? If so, do that. Else if this variable an instance of an integer, and then do this. So in this case, the formatted UWI is a string. There's also Boolean methods that you can do. And we'll see these here. You can check if it's all numbers or if it's all alphabetic. If the string is a number, a lowercase and uppercase. We'll go ahead and run through those examples. What it starts with and ends with. You can also combine Booleans. You can use the and that can either be the word written out or the character, or you can use or. And you combine these logic functions in order to test for whatever you need to do. So here's a few examples of combining different logic functions. Moving on to functions. So functions are a really nice way of, let's put it this way. There's a quote, and I don't remember who exactly said it, but lazy code is efficient code. It's a way of not rewriting everything that you need to do. It's a way of storing the code so you can use it later for other stuff. So you don't have to rewrite it every time you need to do it. How you do this is you tell Python that I want to define a new function. You give that function a new name, and then you send the variables that you want to send to it within that. So we're going to take the same thing that we did farther up and format these components of an API code, and we're going to return that. So this is the same. We're going to take the state, bring it in here. We're going to convert it to a string, send it back to that variable name. We're going to say while it has a length that is less than 2, let's add that preceding 0. We'll do the same thing, convert county to a string. While it has a length of less than 3, we'll add a 0. So if it only has 1 character, it's going to go through this twice. And then we'll do the same thing for the well code. And so while it has a length that's less than 5, we'll add preceding zeros. Then we'll go in here at the very end and we'll add our delimitors. The whole variable defined with previous must contain. Sign. Oh, okay. And then from this function, it will return our formatted API number. So when we call this, because this is the last line of code within our cell block, oh, I got to run that first. Hey. So we define our function and then we use it. And we have it right here. Yeah. The other cool thing you can do with functions is you can set default values. And what this is right here is I said that the default value for delimiter is a dash. And that way, later on, if you want to change little tiny tweaks within your stuff, you can. So this is exactly the same as this, except for right here, I use the default value of the delimiter. And then I return it. So we can run this with the default value in this line, or we can change it so it's formatted without a delimiter, which is nothing in a string. Oh, there we go. And there we have it. So we can run it either way. So within that, you can also do classes. Classes are a way of grouping lots of different functions together and then also creating an object. And that object allows you to store different things within it. It is a little bit alien when you first start out, but the earlier you learn to do that, the more easy it's going to be down the road. So I explained that. I'm going to walk through this, and then you guys can definitely ask questions because I want it to be fairly straightforward. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to define a class by calling class, what that class name is. And then we're going to initiate that, which is this special function right here. We're going to say for this self's class, we're going to store these things, the state, the county, the well, and the delimiter to this object that we're making. So we're going to store the state code, we're going to store the county code, and the well, and the delimiter. And then we also have a function within this class, which is what we did right up here. And we'll wrap it all up and it'll return this. So again, we're going to use the McKenzie well, that first well in Colorado up in Boulder County, which is actually an oil town. Most people don't like talking about that.
Especially Boulder.
Yeah, I know, right? That's okay. All right, so we've defined that class. And we'll go ahead and we're going to call this to an object called McKenzie. We're going to define the state, the county, the well within this. And because we don't have anything at the end of this, we're going to use our default delimiter value. And then once we do and we make this object, we can then use a period and whatever that variable is, because we defined it here, to call those items. The other cool thing is you can actually go in and redefine them. And that's what I do here. So we'll go ahead and we'll call the state from that object, the county from that object, the well from that object. We can run the format function right here on that object. We can then change that within the object, the delimiter, and then we can rerun it and look at the difference. So we can see those items within there. and there. Classes are a little bit tough to get started with if you're not used to those, but they're super, super useful, and they make your code way cleaner. And then also more efficient too. Is there any questions on classes? Because this example was, we're ahead of time, but this example is a little bit more involved, so I want to give you a little bit extra time. Questions, answers, no? Okay. Sounds good.
They all had to go grab another beer.
Yeah, that's okay. So here's another give it a try. So I have a list of API numbers for wells drilled in Colorado before 1930. And what I want you to do is I want you to go in and produce a dictionary with one county and a list of all the values which are well numbers within that. So that way you can tell which counties had early development and how many wells were they in that county. So this is an example of one of those tasks where if you had to do it by hand, it's going to take quite a while. But if you type out and write up the Python code, you do it once, and then it's an almost instant thing after that. If you need the API codes, they're down here. There's a couple of different ways to do this. For those of you that want to make a dictionary out of the county codes before, if you double click on a markdown code, you can actually see what's within it. And you can copy and paste this and split this and then do an index item as a hint. I will come back here in just a bit, answer questions as they come up, as well as I'll start walking through it so you guys can see how it's done on screen. So, and then if you want that out of the markdown code, you run it with Shift Enter. All righty, give it a run, guys. I'll be back just a second.
Oh, I don't want to lose it again.
Yeah, I don't want to lose it again either. I'm not gonna. We can mute it.
Chill.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I switched over. This is actually Coda. It's a friend of ours here in Golden. He's a biochemist by trade. He makes some amazing beer.
Curbside pickup?
Curbside pickup? No, but they have a minimal contact pickup. Oh, Q&As. What brewery? It's Coda. Oop, right there.
Yeah.
There we go. I can send a link out. The whole variable defined previously is a list that contains strings. Side. Oh, that was from before. What? Oh, so they were all lowercase. So Nicholas in the comments wrote it in. That's actually really efficient. You know, if you were to convert the whole string into uppercase, no matter how the instance was set up, it would do that. That's pretty cool. And see, this is the thing what I was talking about with social programming, is because you find out new methods of doing things that you may not have thought of yourself. So. And Coda is not sponsoring this at all. I just want to say that.
Or Coda.
Yeah, no, they're great guys. Luke's awesome.
They're used to it.
Yep, they live in Golden as well. They're local folks. Yeah, Coda for coding. Yeah, kind of. It's also, you know, he's a scientist as well. He worked for Anschutz Medical for a long time and did protein crystallography. So we'd make synthetic proteins, and then they'd study the crystallography with, I believe, X-rays to look at the folding patterns. Crazy stuff. All right. Oh, Chinese delivery.
Who said Chinese delivery?
Oh, no, it was my thing that was up.
Oh.
Yeah, we got Chinese food for this evening. So where's everybody located?
We have global presence to sign up.
Yeah?
Ask what industry and what.
Yeah, what industry and where are you guys located? Lakewood? Woo woo. Loco. Boulder. Casper, Wyoming. Hey, Mike.
Salt Lake.
Yup. Palisade. Some Austin, some Arvada, North Houston.
Foxborough.
Houston. Sebastian. Hey, buddy.
Oklahoma.
Norman. I missed the deli. I used to live in Oklahoma City.
Columbus.
Ohio.
Woohoo! Look at all this. Ah, yes, the deli. It's still kicking.
Haven't been shut down yet. Those red cups are wicked.
All right, you want to jump on and wrap this sucker up?
I'm just slowly working through it.
You gotta tell them what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. So remember when I was talking about the triple quotes earlier? So what I did is I just copy pasted all this stuff in to make a really long string. Remember we have news over here. Actually, let's go ahead and replace those. I bet they're going to pop in. Well, no, I didn't reset the line. We should be okay. Yeah, I don't think I need to do that. So then we're going to split it by the comma to make a list. And then I'm going to do one of those inline for loops. So I'm going to say for each item in that list, what I want to do is a method called strip. And what that does is it pulls any white space off the ends. So you could also do this by taking a string in the very beginning and replacing the space if you wanted. So we're X strip for the items X in UWIs. And then let's go ahead and take a peek at that. So we'll do print first 3. Four, yeah. All right, so that's working. We got them broken apart and they're cleaned up. And the next thing that we're going to do is we want to go ahead and go through all of these, and we're going to make, go back. We're going to make a dictionary for each county that's in there. A couple of different ways you can do this. Let's see here. So I'm going to split it up by the dashes. Okay, and then I'm going to take the second, which is, remember, 0, 1, 2. So we're going to take the second item. Okay, and I want to do this. Okay, let's see here. Now let's look at what that variable is. Okay, so we have our counties, which are unique. Remember, we use set. Okay, so then let's go up here. Let's make a new dictionary. We'll call it CEO County Count. Okay, we're going to make a new dictionary. And then we're going to say for, how should we do this? Should we do it through, let's do for the county in counties. So each unique county, we're going to do, we're going to do a county list equals X. So we're going to split apart each API code by that, and then we're going to grab the last item in there. We can do 2, or we can also do -1 for X in UWIs. And here's the thing: if county is in X. Well, we can just do X. We don't need to split it out. So then let's just go ahead and also show you guys how this works. We can just print those out before we actually define them to so we can see, as we saw before, and this is one of those things you always want to check the variables as you're writing up code, so we can see that as we go through. Okay. So what did I ask? I asked, yep, last 5 digits for that county. And then what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and then, so for our dictionary, which is county count, remember square brackets, we'll put the county in there, and then we're going to find that to the county list. Okay, and then let's go ahead and take a look at our county count variable at the end. So we can see for each key, we have a list of all those well codes. And now let's write a little thing up to print those so they look a little nicer. So we're going to say for the key and value in that dictionary's items. So print the key has length of V let's see, had. There we go. Selective intelligence. And we can do that there.
I think we have the whole variable defined previously.
That was from before.
Okay.
Yep.
It just popped up on mine.
So.
Cool.
Okay. Are there any other questions? running a little ahead of time. That's all right. Yeah. See if we had any other questions on stuff. Oh, here we go. Oh, those are the same. Oh, I didn't know you could do that. There we go. Oh. Okay, Coda.
Are y'all back talking to beer?
No, I didn't know you could type them in. Well site geology. Aaron. Okay.
How about sorting the countries?
Counties.
Counties, sorry.
Hey, Fleming. How you doing, bud?
Hey, Fleming.
Okay. So what we can do is if we want to do that, we can actually do this. So Fleming.
No, hey, Mike. Hey, no, Mike. I don't know what that means.
Oh, I don't. Okay. So what we can do is we can go in here and we can change that set that we made into a list. And then lists allow us to do something called sort. Sorted. There we go. And then we can go in here and do that.
You need to use a microphone.
Ah, I got you. So then we can go ahead and go in there and do those. So we can also go in, and this was kind of what I was talking about earlier. If somebody wanted to go in here and separate these out. So insert, let's see here, code cell. Did I do it before? Well, as long as we define it to a variable before. So county code string. The items for loop is something defined in the dictionary. So the items, so I think what you're asking for.
Did we answer Fleming's question?
Yeah, how to sort. Yeah, that's right here. So we changed that set back to a list on the type, and then a list has a method called sorted. And we can then make that into a sorted list. And then so that changed the order of our codes here.
Okay. Making sure we answered him. Now, the items in a for loop is something defined in the dictionary. So yeah, so whenever you can do call for on a dictionary without items, that's what that is because that object or the variable is a dictionary type, you can call items on it, and then it returns key and value as it goes through every single thing in that. If you don't call items, here I can show you. Yeah, can you demonstrate one more time for that? Yep, so for X in CO count, print X. So if you look at the difference between the two of these, this one separates out the keys and the values. This one, even though this is a dictionary, will only return the keys. So, and then we can go in there. Another little shortcut, you hit Control / to comment out code. Makes it a lot easier. All right, so let's take this guy. Let's make a dictionary down here. And the nice thing about Jupyter Notebooks is you can go into them and define a variable down below, run it, and then it knows it up above. Generally, you only do that when you're prototyping, and then you move the boxes, the cells of code around. So let's go ahead and split. We'll split by new line, home,
And CO lines equals, okay. We'll preview that. The items in a for loop is something is defined in the dictionary. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
We answer them.
Oh, square brackets.
Cool.
Okay. And then what we're going to do is we'll do this. CO. Okay. So CO codes equals, make a new dictionary. And then let's do this. For X in CO lines. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to split them apart. So county, we'll do this. We're going to go ahead and do X split by that. And it's going to split this here so that there's nothing in this one. So we want 0, 1. We want 1. And then we're going to do the name. X. Somebody's yelling outside.
Yeah, someone's like losing it.
Okay, and then we're going to do the name. So it's 0, 1, 2. Okay, and then we're going to define the items within that dictionary. So CO codes blank county code equals the name. And then let's preview that. Make sure I got it right. Always check your variables. All right, that looks pretty good. See, we can use it up here now. So, and then what we're going to do is say, see, in that way, we actually use another dictionary to pull up the names. So, well, I think if there's any other questions,
And then I'll.
yeah, give it a couple minutes, see if you guys have any other questions on that kind of stuff. And then we can go from there. And I sent out some links earlier through Catherine.
At the bottom when we put it on YouTube.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go ahead and put those out with the YouTube stuff as well. And as well as links to the GitHub page. So anybody in the future wants to walk through this, you guys can.
Okay. Let me.
All right. Sounds good. Have a good one, guys.
Whoa, you're still my. You really are a disaster sometimes.
Really? It's fun.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining tonight. Again, huge shout out to our sponsors, RMS SCPM and DIPS, and then, of course, Matt and Mine's company, HackerVillage, which will be putting on a hackathon for the energy sector up here in the Rockies in October. So follow the CRUDE Audacity Podcast LinkedIn page for more information. We actually have 2 more of these Python classes. So what Matt did tonight was really go through the syntax of Python so we can get a foundation going to help build you guys up. And we have 2 other instructors who are lined up and ready to go here in the future. But otherwise, thanks so much for tuning in. Go to my podcast, the CRUDE Audacity podcast on Apple. Leave me a rate and review. Listen to Matt's episode. Tons of great influencers. And until next time, we will see you. So go out and give them hell.